On today's episode of the DeRaud-Messinger Show, Dylan, we're talking Texas and the transfer portal. Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's greatly appreciated. And don't forget to check us out and our work at HornSports.com for all the latest. We also have quite the following on Twitter because, Dylan, Texas fans love Horn Sports. So that's our plug. But Dylan, to begin, it isn't Christmas, but Dylan, check under the tree. There might be a gift that's wrapped for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns with this transfer portal opening. Of course, Dylan, though, must be noted, Sarkisian and the staff, while still having their hand in recruiting right now, have a reason not to be in the recruiting mode with the college football playoff game against Washington that is coming up. But Dylan, must be noted, you got to make these notes beforehand. You can't just grab anybody from the portal. That's one. You got limited spaces on your team's roster for next year. That's two. Any fit is not always the correct fit. That's three. As in, character issues are something that definitely need to be sorted out before any sort of acquisitions can be made, because not everyone's going to be able to fit into this new culture that, Sarkisian has
Yeah.
fostered here. So some of the best names available that we're going to be talking about might not even be the best for Sarkisian. Of course, that's for his staff to do the homework on and do some interviews, Dylan. But with that being said, let's look at wide receiver. Dylan, any names that jump out to you, knowing
This one hit.
knowing that Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Sanders might be gone. I know he's a tight
Yeah.
end. Whittington.
Talk about losing a big core of your offense there. It's or just in general your entire team with guys that it's gonna be very hard to replace. But when you look at this portal, the biggest name for me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Devin. This one hits a little close to home. 4-star, former 4-star at least. I think actually no, 5-star, number one wide receiver in his class
One of
before
these
joining Ohio
stars.
State. Devin, I'm going all over the place. I had Julian Fleming, 6'2",
Okay,
210.
okay.
50-50 ball playmaker and has the big playability after the catch. I think the biggest thing is he was outshined on this Ohio State offense, specifically by Marvin Harrison Jr., who's obviously was a uh, nominee for the Heisman. And then you had Emeka Ibuka as well. So that there was a lot of mouths to feed on that offense. Fleming actually had a pretty good game against Michigan in his last game playing for Ohio State, it sounds like. I think he'd be a great get. He adds that size similar to Adonai Mitchell that you get back. You'd have that, 50-50 ball kind of playmaking that Jatavian Sanders leaves behind, even though obviously not the same position. But it fills in that more possession ball guy, but that you can also throw it deep to and can just go up there and make a play on third down or so. So I think he would be a great get for this Texas team.
No, Dylan, I love that name. I had a little section of this one called the Fun Names List, and I added
Mm.
that and thinking that maybe I can sneak this by Dylan, as a Michigan guy. Maybe, of course, he'll have the
I
opinions
gotta
on him.
respect talent when I see it. I gotta respect
You
talent when
got
I see
got to
it.
respect it. But of course, one of the top receiving recruits in the country when he was coming out of high school, which Dylan was kind of
Yeah.
noting about, just his acclaim. I know I love that name, Dylan. When I saw that name kind of farther down in the list in terms of the rankings of certain sites on 3 24/7
Yeah.
Sports, kind of surprised me. Of course, he had a down year this year, Dylan. But you said the names have been, pretty big around him. Not too many passes to go around. And he had a big year, relatively, of course, the season before. But also, he was in Ohio State team that, of course, has a winning culture. Now, Dylan, national championships have been lacking there as of late, which I'm sure you're happy about. But he's in a culture, or has been in a culture, that likes to win. Dylan, do you have any other big names, or should I give you one?
No, I mean the other one that I had, because I was looking at the speed aspect of it, is Dion Burks from Purdue. 5'11", track star when he was in high school. Obviously, he'd be more so used at the kind of outside route, like screen routes, and then you could use him in the middle of the field out of the slot position. So he would add some of that speed that you're losing with Worthy. Obviously, not the same level of size and not the same level of kind of playmaking after the catch, but he would add that speed that Sark really likes to have. And I know they have Jonte Cook, obviously, waiting in the wings. But this adds another dynamic because I know with Sark, he's really big about building on the trenches and then having those fast skill players on the outside.
I think that's a good note too to just mention Jonte Cook. Sarkisian has Cook and a couple other young receivers that are waiting for their opportunity, Dylan. So while Whittington, as I mentioned, Worthy and AD are likely gone to the NFL, and then tight end, which we'll touch on in a second, Jatavian, all likely gone. There are guys that are waiting for that opportunity. So for Sark, as I mentioned earlier, there's really no reason to make an acquisition just to make an acquisition. You're going to want to add someone that is talented. But Dylan, in my opinion, you do want to add someone that can do something automatically in terms of produce, but also has experience because a lot of young bucks still in that locker room that
Uh-oh.
once Washington or not, excuse me, Washington Whittington. I got the Huskies in my head, don't I? I got
Oh, you're looking ahead, Devin. That's bad. You're in your
deer
head
in the
right now.
headlights, deer in the headlights. But once Whittington is gone, he's kind of the voice of reason in that locker room. You're gonna need someone else in there, I think, to kind of lead the troops. I would agree with Burks. That's a good addition. I wrote it down as stats from last year: 47 catches, 629 yards, 7 touchdowns. Hudson Card must be noted as his quarterback. So we got the
Listen,
Texans. Yeah.
Big Ten West team too. Not exactly offensive superpowers over
Oh
there.
yeah, yeah. As we all know. Now, doing some other names to just mention quickly that have been related to Texas. First, the South Carolina senior wide receiver Juice Wells apparently was supposed to be on a visit, I believe, this weekend, Dylan, to Texas, but that sounded like it got extended, maybe postponed to next weekend. But yet again, Dylan, when you start postponing visits, there's always good reason to be scared. We'll see if he gets snatched up by another team. But the 6'1 South Carolina receiver, not this past season, but in 2022, caught 68 catches, 928 yards, 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Big production. I believe he was just kind of shaken up this year dealing with injuries. But if you can get him healthy, kind of like the Jalen Catalon argument from last year that we had. If you
That
can,
might be a bad argument to make right now, just given Catalan now his
oh
performance
yeah,
was
yeah,
this year, just with
100%.
injuries. But
Yeah, Catalon himself is in the transfer portal. Juice Wells, though, the argument that you're making last year to add Catalan, if he can get back to those ways, that's a big production get for Texas. And then the other fun names, Dylan, I had Burks and Wells were the first two on the list, but all these guys would make sense in one way or another. You have the Houston sophomore wide receiver Matthew Golden, who was
mm,
recruited by Texas coming out of high school, would be
that
elect.
adds some special teams.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I was gonna say is a electric special teams returner, which especially with Worthy leaving, assuming that he's leaving, that would be a big get. And then he also produces at wide receiver as well, Dylan. So he's versatile in that aspect. And then the other one, this is a kind of fun Midland legacy shout out, Dylan. The Tulane freshman receiver Chris Brazel the second, he just balled out at Tulane. And
Mm.
I don't want to say quietly, Dylan, because they're not Power Five school, but he had some numbers over there, and with his head coach leaving for that Houston job, it's going to be fun to see whether he leaves for Houston or whether Texas wants to give him a call. He's a speedy wideout who also has some size. He's about 6'4", surprisingly, Dylan. So that would be another interesting name, just with the experience. But he is a young guy too, which is good and bad in terms of the leadership. Maybe you want an old head in there, for lack of a better word. But on the flip side, he has some room to grow in your locker room,
Mm.
in your team, and you have years. In terms like baseball, you get years of having the guy. What's it called? You know what I'm talking about? The
Farm system.
yeah, exactly. Farm. You got years to work with him
Okay.
as well. I'm getting old up here in my brain. So next position we have, I put tight end. Now, Dylan, I'm going to have you talk about why tight end isn't too big of a position of need in your eyes.
Well, you saw it with Jatavian Sanders kind of being up and during kind of a stretch of the season where you saw more of Gunnar Helm. Thought he fit in pretty well, just kind of picking up the slack for Sanders while he was off the field in more ways than one, especially with the receiving aspect. He's got great hands. And then as well as the blocking side of it too, because that's the big thing with Jatavian Sanders as well. You're going to focus in on his receiving action and the ways that he can get open during play action plays for you is just kind of a safety blanket in general, especially on third and long situations. It felt like Sanders was always there to make a play. Gunnar Helm has the capability. I think he showed the steps that you'd like to see out of a young tight end as he progresses into this starting role. So I think adding a blocking tight end through the portal would be a huge get, but I think as your number one option at tight end, I think Gunnar Helm is in a great spot to take that.
I love Gunnar Helm, and that's why I gave you the room to talk about him there, Dylan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Of course, as the experience has been garnered by Helm, he's just gotten better at the position, which, of course, for most guys, you'd hope and assume that's the case with more experience. But some guys don't just go out there and they lay an egg. Helm was not an egg layer for Texas this year. In the chances he had,
Congratulations.
thank you. The chances he had for the Longhorns out there, he was producing. So it would be helpful, though, for Sark to add someone else to help alongside Helm, because Sark likes to use a lot of two tight end sets. Two names I wrote down and a lot of people have talked about, Dylan. You have the Notre Dame sophomore tight end. Yet again, Notre Dame's one of those tight end universities. The 6'4", 230-pound Holden Stays. This past season, he caught 15 balls and 176 yards for 4 touchdowns. Not electric stats, but he also had a little bit of an injury-riddled season. So it's something to watch out for. Another guy that would still have some years of control, to quote our farm talent availability baseball reference. It's a late night recording, guys. You gotta hang out with us a little bit.
We're struggling.
Dylan's looking just fine over there, though. But
Yeah.
the other guy to mention, jokes aside, Oregon State sophomore. Yet again, if you're going to pluck guys from universities, Oregon State is one of those right now. It's unfortunate. Yep. We love Oregon State on this channel, but it's worth giving some of their top players a call. You got sophomore Jack Velling, the 6'5", 225-pound tight end. He's been putting up some stats this year, Dylan. 29 catches, 438 yards, and importantly, 8 touchdown catches. Yeah. With the offense being the way it was in the red zone this year, Dylan, maybe it helped to have another target. Although, A.D. Mitchell in the red zone, he got plenty of looks. So I don't know how much the pass catchers have been the problem in the red zone, or maybe
it's a lot of the scheme, right? It is scheming a wide receiver open, or just obviously with Adonai Mitchell's case, being able to get open the way he does. But having more guys there for when, things don't happen the way you want formationally.
Fan.
And you gotta freelance a little bit. It's nice to have 6'5" guys waiting in the end zone somewhere.
100%. And like I said, Sark likes using those two tight end sets, Dylan. So if you want to go the big jumbo packages up front, Helm and another tight end that has the pass catching ability would be helping the Longhorns next year, especially when we consider, like we were talking about earlier, losing all those hands that they have on the offensive side. Now, speaking of offense, we're going to make a flip. We're going defense here. Defensive line / edge. Dylan, any names?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest things, Devon, I don't know how you necessarily replace T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy if Byron Murphy does go pro.
You can't.
But what you can do is add size, and size is out there, most notably from a team, Devon, that maybe a lot of Longhorns fans aren't too in love with, but you can't deny talent here when you look at interior linemen with Walter Nolan and LT Overton from Texas A&M. Those are the two top-rated interior linemen in 24/7, Devon, within the transfer portal. So getting guys like that would be huge, just adding that pieces of just bigger bodies up front, because that's where Sark and this defense really like to kind of claim their territory up front to really force, obviously the quarterback to get a little bit, frazzled in the pocket and stifle that running game. So those are two names that I think would be great to add in this situation when you're losing that amount of size. Granted, you're losing guys that are, top 3 round worthy. So that's just really hard to do in general, but getting guys like this, be able to make up the difference.
Oh, 100%. Nolan Dillon, he's really the crown jewel right now in that transfer portal, to be honest. Last year, 37 tackles and 4 sacks for the A&M sophomore. Of course, I don't think Longhorns fans would be too mad about flipping one of A&M's greats. But it is worth saying, Dylan, of course, A&M with the new hire in Mike Elko. A lot of their transfer portal players might be popping back to that Texas A&M roster sooner than later. I heard some rumors that Elko is giving them some time to, look at their options before he giving them the ultimatum saying you're either in or you're out. No one would be a big get for the Longhorns, but other schools like Oregon, Tennessee, and pretty much everyone, because like I said, crown jewel of the country right now in terms of the transfer portal, would be interested in his services. Another name, Dylan, I had is one to really watch out for. You Longhorns fans should know of this name already. UTSA redshirt sophomore Trey Moore, the 6'2", 240-pound edge rusher. Dylan, UTSA, of course, not a Power 5 level, but last year for UTSA, he tallied 14 sacks. Dylan, 14. I mean, in college
It
football.
doesn't matter where you are. If you're putting up
Exactly.
those kind of numbers,
Oh,
you're good.
if you're putting up 14 sacks in college football, you have an ability to get to the passer. Definitely a name that Texas would want to add here, and it is, a realistic name for Longhorns to get. We'll see in the coming weeks if they're able to do so. Another fun name, Dylan, I wanted to mention here. He's from Manor. You got Austin area talent that is in the portal. The Florida Junior. Now, this is where it gets difficult because his name has always been one that I've not wanted to pronounce, but here I am. Princely Uman Mielen. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, this guy out of Manor has just been one of those guys, when you see him on the field, you know he's a top recruit for a reason, Dylan. We'll have to see whether Texas gives him a look. He's 6'4", 250 pounds. Coming out of high school, had a lot of NFL draft comparisons in terms of some of those late round tiers. Any NFL caliber player, though, Dylan, if the character fits, is worth an ad, of course, even with those limited spots that Texas has. Last year for Florida, 7 sacks in the SEC. Quite impressive. 39 tackles. So that would be another guy that Texas should give a look. Now, Dylan, safety position to end out here. I don't know if you're going to go the Austin area guy as well, but I have a feeling you will.
That's exactly who I had.
Who is it? Who is it over there?
Oh, you're gonna make me say this, or?
Okay. I'll do it because Dylan might butcher it. You got the
Oh
Clemson
no.
Junior out of Austin LBJ in high school, and of course,
Yeah.
well noted that his high school coach is now on the Texas Longhorns staff. You got Andrew Makuba, the 6
That's
foot,
exactly how I was gonna say it. So
exactly,
thank you.
185-pound safety that also plays a little bit of nickel. Dylan, talk about Makuba.
This is exactly the type of guys you want. Yeah, to add to your roster, especially Austin area, his head coach working for the staff, right? So I think all signs kind of point towards that would be a great fit if he decides to come over to the 40 acres. But again, you talked about it, nickel. These are the type of safeties that you want on your team because they're versatile. You can move them into coverage. They can help with the running back side and in terms of the run game and just getting them up and adding more pressure there. So I think he would be a great fit there as well because you're losing with Catalan. You're losing a hard hitting safety. So adding guys like that kind of bring that mentality, albeit with Catalan's talent, there was that injury concern with
Yeah,
Makuba. You don't have that, at least not hopefully, right? So
knock on wood.
getting guys like this with experience is exactly what Texas needs in the secondary because they already got young guys that are obviously going to get older. They're garnering experience from the season. So adding a guy that kind of fits within that timeline like Makuba, again, I'm going to say it again, but I just think that's a great fit to add, especially from a Clemson team that say what you want about Dabo Sweeney, but those teams tend to be pretty well coached, especially on the defensive side.
100%. In Makuba, Dylan, like we were talking about Catalan earlier on the flip side, and the injury bug just was not the greatest get in the end. Of course, hindsight's 2020, but it's just, I think injuries caught up to him, and as the season went on, it didn't seem like he had a couple of banged up stuff, but as the season went on, I just think the coaching staff was utilizing him less still, and he was not really getting as much playing time for it. So it made sense for him as a football guy that, of course, loves to see the field to test the portal. Now Makuba here, though, knock on wood yet again. Dylan's talking about injuries. Hopefully, everything turns out fine with Makuba. You're trying to jinx stuff. Yet again, double knock on wood there.
Okay, no, I don't.
Double knock on wood there. Makuba, an Austin native, out of Austin LBJ, yet again has the staff connection, but as Dylan mentioned, is versatile, and with cornerback, Dylan, I know we're talking safety, but with cornerback, you got a lot of young guys that are going to grow on this team and some commits and recruits that are, looking to also get some playing time at cornerback. Safety has been a maybe bigger issue. So Makuba, just someone that you can plug and play anywhere, would be a big help immediately for Texas. It would make sense, really, out of all these guys, Dylan, in terms of the most makes sense. Of course, everyone's at a certain level. This is like a home run get if Sarkisian can get him heading into their first year in the SEC. Any last words?
Again, you're losing a ton of talent this Texas team, albeit in these cases, right, with the graduation, it's just Texas has overexceeded expectations. So I don't know how much of losing in the semifinal, if that happens, some of these guys will stay for unfinished business going in to the SEC. So transfer portal is going to be one of the Texas' best friends. But just with the recruiting Stark has done, a lot of that talent within the organization, it's really just coming from the bottom up, right? So it's getting the outside pieces to fill in a little bit of the gaps to add more competition in the spring camp, um, to really kind of light that fire with Texas. Because the last thing you want to do is get stagnant, especially making this shifting conferences.
Exactly, and maybe, Dylan, as time goes on, Texas also has more of its own transfer portal woes, for lack of a better word, excuse me. So we'll see. Maybe there's going to be more positions that are needing to be filled, but for right now, this is the watch list, the wish list, also, if you will.
Mm.
But Dylan, like I said, this is going to evolve in terms of the transfer portal over time. So we might see some new names. So we'll definitely be talking about this most likely sooner rather than later. Now, Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's really greatly appreciated. When I say that, I mean it. If it's greatly appreciated, check our workout at HornSports.com. And as always, don't forget to have a great rest of your day.